I'll just start by asking you, I mean, first, thanks for your time,
Sure.
very much. First, let me ask you, like a normal, say and spell your name, and
Okay.
give your title so we can't screw it up later.
Yeah, it's Brent, Brent, Maxey, Maxey. I'm a patrol sergeant or police sergeant assigned to patrol at Central Precinct on afternoon shift.
And you've been with the Bureau for how long?
Over 18 years.
And you've been in the position that you're in within the Bureau for how long?
A little over a year and a half. I got promoted in December I guess, what would that be? 2018? Yeah.
Time is running together for everybody.
Right, yeah. I was promoted at that time, and that's when I was assigned to Central Precinct. Prior to that, I worked patrol my entire career. I worked many years out at East Precinct. I was a district officer out along 82nd Avenue, kind of in the Powell area. I was the neighborhood officer for the South Tabor neighborhood, and prior to that, I worked Southeast Precinct before it closed. And prior to that, I worked on night shift at Central Precinct.
And we were just talking about you had a role with less lethal and
Yeah.
the correct terminology. Go ahead and I'll let you take it.
So throughout my career, I've always been interested in coaching and training and being an instructor. And so I currently I'm an instructor of I'm a firearms instructor. A less lethal instructor, and which is like the impact rounds that you see. The rapid response team has a bunch of different, I guess, munitions is what we call them, like the CS gas and the smoke and things like that. And I was the lead instructor for a short time of that, but I've been an instructor of that for several years. I was on the rapid response team for 13 years, and so I have a background in that. And then additionally, I'm an instructor of what we used to call defensive tactics. They're control tactics now, which is just kind of the hands-on, I guess, control of people that are resisting or the manipulation of hands and stuff going behind the back for handcuffing and things like that.
Is that particularly specialized training? And I guess what I'm getting at is how many officers who are at these protests night after night that seems like a highly specialized background that could really be applied to the situation that we're all grappling with and watching.
Sure.
And I'm wondering how many are sort of as qualified as you, but that's kind of how it feels.
Well, everybody that goes through, through their academy training and ongoing in-service and everything like that, we are continuously training and evolving that training, and particularly for, let's say, for example, the defensive tactics program, which is now control tactics. It's changed in terminology. It's changed in how we train. It's changed in really what the focus is. It used to be pretty. I think in a way it was pretty standardized, at least throughout Oregon, given that the training was, a lot of it's all filtered through DPSST, and then Portland would have its own spin on it, and it's evolved to the point where some of it is not recognizable for officers necessarily that would have retired, just a few years ago. But everybody gets that ongoing training. And then in terms of, the less lethal type training, everybody that is out there has ongoing training. They go through certification courses. They have continuous qualifications that they have to do and everything like that. There are, I guess even more specialized are the instructors. They're the ones that, we, in my time doing that, I would travel to different trainings in other parts of the state or along the West Coast where classes were available to get that training as a certified instructor to then go take that curriculum back to the Portland officers.
So it's somewhat rare. I mean, the amount of experience
in terms
expertise that you have.
Yeah, in terms of the number of people that have that particular training bureau-wide, it's relatively limited as compared to, the number of operators that are out there carrying that equipment.
Okay. So, specific to what is happening in Portland right now, our team at KGW, our team at The Story, had reached out multiple times asking to speak to an officer who's been at the protests. You emailed us.
Yeah.
And said that you would do it.
Yeah.
Why?
Throughout my entire career, I've never been the type of person to do this sort of thing. I quietly do my job and I go home. And there is so much in the way of what I believe to be false information out there, and nobody is really out there speaking up. It kind of started off where there was a letter that was written to Mayor Wheeler that was public from House Speaker Kotek. And it really struck a little bit of a chord with me, where she mentioned that, without police escalating the situation with what amount to riots, that the crowd would simply stop their behavior and go away. And I had a personal experience, which I shared in a previous press conference about that. And I really thought that it was time for somebody who has firsthand knowledge of this to speak up. And I mean, I'm not the only one that's doing that. There are several other officers that are doing it. But there is, there's concern about, putting your name out there or putting your story out there and being a target. And I've just gotten to the point in my career and to a point with what's going on now that I just want to tell the truth. I want the truth to be out there, and I want people to hear the truth. So that's why I got in contact with you, or with Dan, after seeing a couple of his videos where he said, we've reached out and haven't heard from anybody.
I know you said you told some of these stories in the press conference. I'm really sorry. I'm going to ask you to be redundant.
No, that's okay.
What is your response? Like, what is the truth in your mind that refutes what Speaker Kotek said, or that you feel like people aren't hearing?
Well, first of all, a lot of the officers that have spoken up have already touched on this, but these protests, they started off as protests. I mean, there's a legitimate message to a lot of this. And, whether we agree with how we got to where we are, there is a legitimate group that has a legitimate message. And I believe Portland is doing an outstanding job of addressing that, and it has been for the last several years in the form, in different reforms and things like that. But these have now devolved. They've been hijacked by anarchists, essentially, and so these they've just kind of devolved into these masses of people that are just bent on destruction and mainly hurting police or anybody that really disagrees with that message. And it's a continuous cycle where this group hijacks whatever they really can. I mean, they did it with, it might not have been called Antifa at the time, but they did it with Occupy. They did it with the inauguration stuff in 2016. They do it with May Day every year. They tried to do it with the Women's March, but the Women's March had enough people where they actually were able to push them out. And so, these things that are happening, they're not peaceful. I mean, the words that are out there these are peaceful protesters. They're not. The peaceful protesters almost every night, almost every night that this has been going on, they've turned into unlawful assemblies. I mean, there's been very few instances where things have not happened that have caused the police to react to what people in the crowd are doing. But every single night that these are deemed either riots or unlawful assembly, people that are peaceful have been given the opportunity to leave through our announcements, time and time again, over and over again. And the people that choose to stay, in my view, are complicit in the overall action that's happening. I see people. You see videos of people with their hands up getting knocked over by police. That's just a snippet of what's happening. Those same people are the ones throwing rocks and bottles. Those are the same people that are throwing, mortars at us. And they're trying to get that clip that shows us doing something, wrong, illegal, brutal, something that looks brutal. It's very calculated. They know what they're doing, but every single person that chooses to stay You know, they kind of break into groups, and we have these people in the back that are throwing things, and the people in the front are intentionally shielding them to keep us from being able to make arrests on what I perceive to be very dangerous people. And it's just the truth is that these entire crowds that are left at the end of the night, I mean, in my observation, almost without exception, every single one of those people is involved in this criminal act.
But I do have to push back on that in the sense that you said the people that are being pushed, the people that are seen in those short videos are the ones throwing rocks, bottles, munitions, when we know journalists have been pushed. Journalists have been challenged physically, and we are absolutely not the ones.
Sure.
And not to say that we're at all more important than anyone else who is out there, but that's a very tangible, obvious example that that's not true.
Okay.
And people might look at that and say, police have said, well, they're throwing rocks and bottles, therefore we've used force as well. They're not the same, though. You all signed up for a job where you uphold the law. And we're all expected to follow it. You're expected to uphold it. So when you say the people that are at the receiving end of physical force are the ones that are launching these projectiles at us, on multiple occasions, we know that hasn't been true. So that it can't be a blanket truth that's applied to the logic of this.
No, I think you're right. I think, I mean, and I'm not saying, you know, every single one of those people with their hands up are the ones that are throwing those objects, but I have seen those people throwing those objects, and to include, you mentioned the media and the press and all
It's just the most
people that are
obvious
out there.
example.
Yeah, exactly. And so I want to be clear with that too, is not everybody out there that is wearing a press badge or has press written across their helmet is press. There was a night a few weeks ago where we actually saw them, not me personally, but officers observed people in the crowd handing out stickers that say press. I have personally seen people wearing press written across their helmet, written across their chest, throwing objects at police. I have personally dealt with people wearing press on their, on their helmets, on their person with press badges, interfering in officers' arrests. I have personally seen those people in officers' faces screaming with bright lights, cameras. I've seen those people engaged in criminal acts. And again, I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, that all of those people are not press, because there clearly are. I mean, you gave some perfect examples, but amongst this chaos, it is so confusing, and just the sheer number of people that are participating in these events, the chaos that kind of ensues, once these events kind of get going, and then the fact that you have people that are purporting to be something that they're not. Just because you have a cell phone camera doesn't necessarily make you press, particularly when you're engaged in criminal activity.
Totally. I think that's a few degrees off of what I'm saying, though. I think press are an obvious example of somebody who wasn't throwing bottles and munitions at you, yet they were on the receiving end of force. Okay. Therefore, that refutes what you said, which seemed like a blanket statement that the people that are on the receiving end are the ones that are launching projectiles at us. I'm just saying, and again, not to extrapolate press from everybody else as far as us being protected more necessarily, but I'm just saying that flies in the face of what you had said, which was that point blank, the people that are receiving the force are the ones that are throwing things at us.
Okay, well, I mean, in that case, I will, concede that sometimes people get caught in the middle. And that, that statement, I wasn't trying to make a blanket statement, but based on my observations, I mean, more often than not, what you're seeing is, again, it's a snippet in time, but it is generally people that are engaged in these criminal acts. And a lot of times, we all know that there are people that are out there that I walk back to where I said the people that choose to stay are complicit in this. That's partially I mean, the fact that they're choosing to stay, even though they may be peaceful in and of themselves, those might be some of the people that, well, maybe they're not the ones that are actually throwing the objects and they've got their hands up, they get pushed. You know, people get caught up in the middle when, stuff is going on back behind them and we make a push. It's really difficult to tell out there, who is who and who's responsible for what, just amidst this chaotic event.
Valid. I don't think I'd be able to tell. But then someone might say, well, let's walk that a step forward and say that force shouldn't be used against people if you can't be sure that they're the ones that are being aggressive toward you.
What's the solution though? I mean, I don't know.
This would be my next question. Like, what?
Right.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, what's the solution? We've given every opportunity to leave for people that don't want to be subject to a use of force, that don't want to be violent. It's almost like standing in the freeway. I mean, this area has been closed, and officers are, if you don't leave, you're subject to use force. And then when a line of officers is running towards you and you stand there, because we're trying to get to the back of the crowd where the real criminals are in the back, throwing things at us. I mean, who's responsible for that? I don't know the answer, because we've seen people that are doing just that we run past and they turn right around and they get on our back and start doing criminal acts from behind. We need to make a push to move all of those people for, to accomplish whatever mission has been set forward, plus to make sure that we're secure, that we're safe from, people coming around behind us like we've seen in the past several nights and, throwing objects or launching ball bearings at us. We don't know. You could have, that person could be peaceful throughout the entire event. Again, peaceful in and of themselves, just as a singular individual. But how do we know when they're going to flip that? How do we know when they're going to turn on us? We don't. And I think those might be the people that we're talking about. They get either caught up in the middle, or they've been given opportunities to leave and they don't. They choose to stay, knowing the consequences.
if they don't leave an area, though, that police have told them to leave, there's a limit, just as there is for any crime in this country, as to what the punishment can be. And physical use of force, to some people, feels like going above and beyond what police are legally allowed to do if it's against mass groups of people and you can't know, like you said, who did what.
Sure. Well, I mean, when it gets to that point where we've given, lawful orders to move or disperse, those people that don't, it's right there in the warnings. We have the authority to use force to move them out of that area. It's just like, I think it's similar to a crime scene. I mean, if we have a shooting that's out here and we have a crime scene roped off and people come into that area, that's a closed area, just like when we declare, an unlawful assembly. It's very similar. That person, it could be subject to arrest if you come through the crime scene tape, and we can use force to effect that arrest. I think the focus, given our staffing and our numbers, is we are making arrests, hopefully going after those people that we see are creating the most damage or doing the most the most assaultive behavior and things like that. Those are the people that we're going after. In order to get to those people, we sometimes have to use force to push the people in the front that, although we very likely have probable cause to arrest them, or at least reasonable suspicion to detain them in any normal circumstance, we can use force to move past or push those people out of the way.
When was the last time you guys used tear gas? I was looking through releases trying to figure CS gas, but
I think it was. I mean, it was a few nights ago. I think I can't remember specifically.
How effective is that?
How effective is CS?
Mhm.
It really kind of depends on the environment and the circumstance. Personally, I believe that it's an effective tool to disperse and to move a crowd. And it's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. But given the alternatives, we just talked about the pushing, launchable impacts, things like that. The effects of CS gas wear off when you move out of the cloud. After a few minutes, generally, or after a shower, the effects are gone. So, based on the I guess kind of the long term, or not really long term. I guess the results of using that as a force option versus using a 40 millimeter impact munition as a force option. You're going to have a bruise from a 40 millimeter launchable impact for a couple weeks. The CS gas is going to be, you're not going to feel the effects within 10 or 15 minutes once you leave.
I'll say I breathed it 2 weeks ago. It was the CS gas that was launched by the federal officers who were here, which a lot of people felt like it felt different. There's no scientific evidence to validate that. That said, I'm just gonna say it was the federal officers who fired it. I, the next morning, woke up with a cough, which is very scary in a pandemic. And there have been articles, one recently by OPB, that tracked women who have been to these protests several nights and are seeing differences in their menstrual cycle. So there are concerns that CS gas isn't harmless once you move out of the way, and yet our police bureau is using it on our citizens. Do those thoughts run through your head at all? Like, have you ever sort of watched it play out and just thought?
Well, I think when you look at the alternative, I think, I don't think that the alternative is better. So the decisions by Portland to deploy CS gas are, in my experience, always very thoughtful. And it is not made on the street level. It's made by command, by the incident commander who's in charge of the overall event. And it's based on information that's being relayed up the chain through, the people on the ground in the street, and it's being filtered through, different social media that we're monitoring, through live streams that we're monitoring, through a number of different perspectives. And if the overall event is to the point where we're going to use CS gas, that, like I said, that decision comes down from someplace else. And based on the instances where I've been out there where I've seen CS gas be used, the alternatives are far worse, in my opinion. We have situations where the precincts have essentially been lit on fire. And, the alternative is to go out and, make a push on the crowd, which, includes potentially impact munitions, baton strikes, pepper spray. In my experience, I have been pepper sprayed. I've been exposed to actually a long-term exposure for CS gas, and I would much rather take an exposure from CS gas than any of those other things. And I just think we kind of have to balance what the end game is, what the end result of this is going to be, and what the overall impact is going to be on the community, and kind of balancing all that with what we're looking to accomplish. And if we're looking to, potentially, East Precinct is attached to apartment buildings. If we're looking at that going up in flames, and it's attached to apartments where people are living, I think we can justify, using CS gas to clear those people out. Again, based on whatever research has been done for, either side of that argument, I don't think that there's been anything that has suggested that, CS gas is more harmful than the alternatives.
I want to drill down one more time, and I'm going to ask you just your take on your experiences as
Sure.
well, but just one more time on the instances, and like I said, they're just the most obvious examples of kind of this back and forth that we've had, where journalists, and we're talking not people who just wrote press on a t-shirt,
Yeah.
like photographers at the Oregonian, reporters at the Portland Tribune, were, and sometimes in some cases were rolling when they were pushed. They were, an officer swore at them, told them to get the fuck out of here or something comparable to that, and they were shoved to the ground, and they were scared by the police officers who they believe are there to serve and protect. And they weren't the ones doing any of these things. I think a lot of people saw that happen. It seemed very tangible and very obvious. There is a procedure to investigate complaints of use of force. That said, they felt like no one from the Bureau came out and said, that was awful.
Sure.
That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Can you say that?
Can I say that was awful and that shouldn't have happened?
Yeah.
Or, here's where maybe I'll disappoint you a little bit, and I'm gonna say no. And the perspective that I'm saying that from is from having been there. Again, it's unfortunate. Yeah. If I had an opportunity, if I was that officer, and I had an opportunity, following it, and I, for example, knocked over somebody that was in that position, and I could go back and explain what happened and apologize to them personally for that, sure, I would do that. And I think just about any officer out here would. But again, these events are absolutely some of the most chaotic events that we deal with. And, separating, who is who, like we discussed, is really, really difficult. And a lot of times, the comment of, get the F out of here or whatever, we're people, we have emotion, our adrenaline is running high, we slip, we swear. I've done that, and a lot of times too, it may be from the perspective of the officer saying, you really need to listen to me right now, and I'm going to swear for emphasis, which is part of, we have that in our policy, if it's going to keep us from having to use more force, if swearing we can use swearing as a tool.
That's written into your policy?
I think, I want to say, if the last time I looked at the policy, I believe it is.
Nothing else, it's clearly implied, but yeah.
Essentially, the gist of it is essentially it's a tool that can be used to hopefully mitigate a use of force. We have to document that.
Well, in this case, it didn't mitigate it, it accompanied it.
Well, but what, again, would a push that knocks somebody down, compared to a baton strike? If I'm pushing somebody and I say, get the F out of here, but the alternative is, please move out of the way, and you don't move, and I hit you with my baton.
But why should that be you're determining the alternative. These aren't universal truths that we're debating against. That's not an automatic alternative.
Yeah.
Why is that an option if it's not someone that especially if they're not doing anything in that moment that's physically aggressive?
Well, again, it's the totality of the circumstances. It's the entire event. What's going on? What are we accomplishing? Announcements. When we get to those points, announcements have been made. You're subject to use of force if you don't essentially follow the officer's commands. And in these rapidly evolving events, they're really, the alternative is that you either the entire squad breaks down and you give up on your job because one person isn't moving, or you push through lawfully because that it's either been declared an unlawful assembly, a riot, or what have you, and we need to push through the crowd.
You asked earlier, well, what's the solution then?
Yeah.
City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty said her solution, if the mayor were to give her the police bureau, would be to no longer send police to protests. What would happen if that were to come to fruition, in your mind?
Today, with this group,
yeah,
I believe that we would have buildings on fire. I truly do. I believe that the legitimate demonstrators, there may be some left that come out during the day and have, demonstrations at Revolution Hall. The people that have been coming out to the Justice Center and to the police precincts, they want to abolish the police, and they've put out on their social media that they're going to continue doing this, and knowing that the city is having to spend essentially millions of dollars on police overtime and repairs and things like that. They're basically trying to bankrupt the Portland Police Bureau. And I think if we didn't respond to these things, we would have buildings on fire. The Portland Police Association building is although that's separate from the police bureau. It's a union office. That would be on fire, and that is in close proximity to a residential neighborhood. I truly believe that would be what we would have, and kind of to go along with that, we a lot of times, again, we most often come from the point of there's a demonstration going on and we are off in the distance. We're ready for it, but we're not showing ourselves to the crowd as to, again, we're not trying to amp it up or escalate it, but again, through what we've seen, what we can hear on live streams, through social media that some of the activists are putting out there, they know exactly what they need to do to get a response from the police. And when it comes to, I'm going to light this building on fire, well, that's going to get a response from the police. We've shown time and time again that we're actually willing to let them vandalize. We're willing to let them take the street. We're willing to let them, do a lot before we get involved. And it comes to a point where there's a safety risk is usually when you see us get involved. So they know exactly what it is that they need to do to get us out in the open so they can essentially fight us.
I was struck by when in your press conference you said a lot of the people in the crowd, I'm going to try to quote it directly, are trying to completely dismantle Portland as we know it.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed several people who have been at these nightly demonstrations, and I can't know if they're at every single one, but I think a lot of them that I've talked to would say, yeah. Or a lot of facets of Portland as we know it.
Sure.
What's that like to keep going back night after night, knowing that like you said, they're in your mind they're trying to bankrupt the police, bankrupt the city,
Yeah.
and you're literally policing a protest against police.
Yeah. It's tough. We don't know what the solution is. We don't know how to stop it. But the thing is it's frustrating too. So here's kind of, I said at the beginning of this that I'm not generally the kind of person that does this. I don't look to for attention or anything like that. I quietly do my job and I go home. But I am the type of person that goes out, and when I'm at a protest or whatever, I am completely open to engaging in dialogue. And I've had those experiences out on the line several nights where I've walked up to the line and just started a conversation with anybody. One night in particular, I was driving by, the group was up in front of the federal courthouse, and I was driving a few blocks away, and I heard a lady scream something really vulgar at me, and I stopped.
You can say it.
She said, "Your mother should have swallowed you," and which I think is,
Yeah.
not really a way to start a dialogue if you want. It was just to get at me. I guess that could be vulgar to me. It is. But anyway, so I just stopped my car and I said, would you like to have a conversation? And after a few choice words, she said she doesn't want to talk to the police. She told me to fuck off. And I said, well, a lot of this, I said, really, that attitude is part of the problem. We're not going to accomplish anything if we're not willing to listen to each other. And she said, okay, yeah, I'll talk to you. And I said, look, we're going to start. Well, I was just kind of like, if we can agree on this, on kind of the format of what we're going to talk about, you're not going to agree with everything I say. I'm probably not going to agree with everything you say. But in the end of this, maybe if we have a decent conversation without any yelling or screaming or name calling, maybe we'll walk out of here with a better understanding of each other. And we talked for probably an hour and a half, and we didn't agree. And but I listened to her, she listened to me, and we walked away shaking hands. In a pandemic, we shook hands. But you know, I think that that's what needs to happen is we need to be able to have conversations rather than screaming matches. And all I see anymore are screaming. We go out and nobody is interested in a dialogue at all. Nobody that I see out there. At least nobody that I can find, because I'm open. I have gone up and down the line almost every night I'm there. Do you want to talk? You know, no. And you know, and that comes with a lot of swearing and cussing and you know, people mobbing basically. You know, if I do find somebody that wants to talk, other people come and shut them down. You know, other people come in, don't talk to cops. We don't talk to them. So I think there's not a lot of interest from this relatively small portion of Portlanders, or a lot of people from out of town even, that want to see this end. They just want to keep it going, and so it's frustrating. I mean, and it's frustrating for all of us.
I will point out, just for accurate, we've looked at all the releases, and it does seem like the vast majority. I'll get some water too, actually. Yeah. That the only way that we can know where people are from, just because this is brought up a lot, is looking at your arrest records.
Yeah.
And it does seem like the vast majority of them are from Portland,
Yeah.
or the Portland metro area.
Yeah,
So whenever
I think
that gets thrown out, I always just try to let's
You're
walk
right.
that back.
Yep. No, you're right. They are. But there are, you know, there's a percentage that's not. And
Sure, but
and I don't know, you know, I don't know what that percentage is, but you know, I only say that from, you know, not as a an indication that all of these people are coming in from out of town. It's just that I've made a personal observation that some of them are. So
gotcha. Can I just ask? I find that line fascinating, because that is used in cities all over the country. Why does that matter? There's no law that says
where people come from. I mean, I don't know that it does. You know, I think there's an idea that that some of these events, you know, that people come in from all different places. I mean, we have seen groups come from Seattle, particularly on social media. You know, we've seen when it comes to the anarchist Antifa groups, they kind of go between Portland and Seattle a lot of times, and it's to these events where, you know, they are wanting to, you know, destroy and things like that. So we have seen that, but you know, in these events, you're right. It really doesn't matter. I mean, if you're out breaking the law, you're breaking the law no matter where it is. If you're, you know, peacefully demonstrating, you're peacefully demonstrating no matter where it is. So, you know.
No. For those who are, like I said, they're looking to dismantle or bankrupt, as you put it, the police department. They just want to defund the police, abolish the police, for the terms that are thrown around. For those who are local and they've been paying attention to recent audits, recent studies, or findings that have come out of city and federal agencies that they feel like have found problems with biases within the Portland Police Bureau, specific, for instance, to the gang violence or the gun violence reduction team, blending two names there. And they look at it and they say, well, it does seem like there are major problems. So kind of A, do you see the merit in their anger? B, when you hear phrases like defund the police, abolish the police, which are thrown around frequently at these protests, I mean, just what goes through your mind?
Well, in terms of the merit to their anger, you know, I look at it from my perspective, and again, that's where the dialogue piece comes in. I'm totally willing to listen to anybody else's perspective, but we can argue the numbers. You know, I think statistics are statistics, and people can make statistics what they want. You know, if we're talking about GVRT and the number, you know, their stop numbers, their job is to, you know, reduce gun violence, and you know, their job, from what they see, the trends that they see, particularly with the victims of shootings. A large portion of those come from the African American community, and the large portion of the community of the people that are committing the violence are in the African American community. So it only makes sense that they are going into those communities to do their enforcement activities. And of course their numbers are going to be skewed. It's the same as if I'm working in Southeast Portland and my job is to address car prowlers. I'm going to stop a disproportionate number of white people. So I think if we are looking at who we're stopping in terms of what our enforcement goals are or what our mission is, it's gonna change depending on what that goal is, and I can't sit here and argue that I know the experiences of a young African American teenager who is living in Northeast Portland or whatever. I don't have that experience. But that particular person, if they were to bring it up to me, I would be totally open to having a discussion about what his experiences are, what I could do to help him feel more comfortable in his environment, and try my best to explain why we do what we do. And I think, again, the statistics, they may be swayed one way or the other depending on the mission, but ultimately, I believe, like GVRT, for example, has proven their worth. They've been gone for a month, and we have shootings going through the roof. And it's just, they have relationships in the community. I've personally been on calls where I wear this patch here. A GVRT or a gang unit officer, when they used to be called GET, would wear a different patch. And I'd be dealing with, a person who, something around a shooting call or some sort of gang violence or something like that. A lot of times they didn't want to talk to somebody with a Portland Police patch. They want to talk to somebody with a GVRT patch. Those are the relationships that were essentially just pulled out of the community by dismantling that unit. So that's, I guess, your first part of the question. The second part was about what I think when I hear about defund or abolish the police. Well, what I think is I think if that happens, first of all, it's gonna have a negative effect on everybody. I don't know, in terms of responding to calls. I mean, who's going to be out there? If there was a complete abolition of the police, who are these same people that are out here rioting at night going to call when their backpack gets stolen? I mean, who are they going to? We've had calls come in from the crowd. They're sitting there talking about abolish the police, but then when something happens in the crowd that they're not happy with, they call 911. Who are they going to call if there's no police? I believe that communities across Portland will be negatively affected, and that's even just defunding. I mean, again, we've seen that in the last month with GVRT going.
Do you see any merit in the argument that if defunding the police, the second part of that is reallocating the funding toward other facets of our society and other systems within our society that would, in the minds of advocates, they believe, reduce crime and reduce poverty and a lot of factors that lead to the need for as many police officers as we currently have? Well,
and here's what I say, and maybe this isn't a popular opinion amongst my peers. I can't speak for everybody, but I think yes. I think if you can figure out a way, if somebody can figure out a way, because we're the last link in the chain. I mean, everything else has failed to the point where it gets to where we're intervening. And we do so much right now. We respond to crimes, we respond to mental health calls, we respond to all kinds of things, a lot of them that maybe we shouldn't be responding to. If there was a way to, I would fully support it if there was a way to take um, to reduce our calls, for example, mental health. If there was a way to reduce our calls and have somebody else go, as long as it was obviously, would have to be safe, that would be great. And taking that money from the police bureau budget or reducing the number of officers is fine. But right now, what I believe is happening is they're putting the cart before the horse. You're taking the money away with no plan or no solution to fill that void, other than the patrol officers that are already stretched super thin. And you can't just take things away without having a replacement for it in place, ready to go.
I mean, what you just described is the definition of defunding the police, which admittedly is a blanket term that's been applied to a lot. But I just want to be clear, you're saying that that part of it you would endorse a definition of it.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't, again, you have to have things in place. You can't just start pulling funds away from the police bureau without a plan. And, right now, I don't see a plan. And so, do you defund the police right now? I don't believe you do. Absolutely not. If, through different organizations and entities and things, if they step up, or if, the state steps up or the county or whomever to fill these gaps, and they figure that out, and then eventually, you can start to siphon funds away from the police because you don't need it anymore. If that works, that's great. I mean, I'm not obviously making those decisions, but I think any patrol officer out here would support, not going to, the mental health call when really we're not needed. We're simply there for a, to support, the social workers or whomever. If they can do that without us, I don't think there's an officer out here that would argue with that.
I'll let you take a drink.
Mm-hmm.
How's this been for your family?
My family is a separate thing. I said in my earlier press conference that we had earlier in the week, I have a pretty decent switch between work and home, and so work is work, home is home, and my family is aware of what's going on here, but we live our life. I have 3 kids and a wife, and we are in the midst of summer vacation right now. What summer vacation we can have.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is a teacher, and she's aware of everybody's aware of what's going on, but I don't bring any of that home, and we just we live a normal life when I'm outside of here. So,
Classic TV producer question. One of my producers asked, do you think he'd at all be willing to give us a photo of his family to paste over this portion of the interview?
No, I don't think so. I'm going to keep that to myself. So.
Might seem obvious, but why not?
You never know. I don't want I certainly don't want them to become a target, which I know even by me being here is somewhat of a possibility. But I just don't want to put their faces out there for that.
How do you turn that off? Like 70 plus, first of all, 70 plus nights. How many nights do you think you've been out there? Even if it's a ballpark.
At least half.
At least half.
Yeah.
How do you turn that off? That is it seems like it would be a really hard psychological move.
Yeah, I can't say that I don't think about, what happened the night before or any of that stuff. Sorry.
No, please. Are you guys doing okay on time?
Yeah, that's fine. It's just my boss calling me. I don't think. How do I turn it off? It's not like I don't think about it when I'm at home or anything. My whole thought process in this is, it really is. This is my job. When I'm at home, I may think about, okay, what do I need to do for work the the hatred that we're experiencing, although there are attempts to make it personal, and some people have had, you know, those personal attacks. Some of our officers have been visited in their homes and things like, or visited at home by people who've had taken issue with either what they've said or what they've done. You know, although I'm vigilant about things like that, you know, this is my job and this is what I do. And then when I'm at home, I just try to live and you know, I think again going back to my previous press conference, I grew up with this. My dad was a Portland cop for 30 years before I got hired, and so I mean I grew up with it. I kind of knew what I was getting into, and I think he handled it a lot the same way, where, you know, he was at home and he'd go to work and then come back, and it was just life, you know. So
I think our jobs share some commonalities in the sense that, like, you don't go into it for the money.
yeah,
You go into it because something about it speaks to you, and you have to be passionate about it, otherwise you would burn out in a week. Journalists, media, whatever, get a lot of flack for very different reasons. But there are times where I feel like it would be really hard to keep that, especially in this hyperbolic moment, from becoming personal. I know you just said people try to make it personal by visiting homes, and I want to ask you
Yeah.
more about that, but even just this is like a passion career that you're in. Like, it has to be, I think, for a lot of people, otherwise.
yeah. I mean, I think it could be. I mean, for me, I don't know. It's hard. I never set out to be a cop. You know, in fact, you know, having a dad that was a police officer, he never encouraged me to do this. He actually, in a way, discouraged me. And I ended up. I went to college. I played football at at Southern Oregon, small college down in Ashland. And when I came out of that, I got a job as a sales rep for a radio group in Medford, and I found real quick that I was not a salesperson, especially with, you know, when it comes to selling advertising, which is kind of this intangible, you know, thing. It's very difficult. I'm sure you have plenty of successful people here that do that, but
Yeah,
that
they
was
put food on my table.
right. Yeah. See, and I was not
No.
one of those, and it's like I need to work. I need to be able to provide for my future family, and I saw the life that I had coming up and what my dad and my mom were able to provide, and I thought, you know, that was a direction I could go, and here I am. So you know, it's for me, it was, you know, it wasn't necessarily a calling, but I think a lot of times the people that come into it maybe with the attitude that I did are not taking anything away from anybody else that I work with, believe me, but I think people that come into it with the attitude that I did are sometimes more successful rather than the, you know, the gung-ho, I want to chase bad guys and be, you know, play cops and robbers cops. So
Oh, I could see that. You mentioned people showing up at officers' homes. We knew officers had been doxxed. Clearly, it's gone farther than that. I mean, what can you tell me about that happening?
well, I mean, I know about people being doxxed. I know that there's been visits at people's homes. You know, there's videos of it on YouTube where you know, officers have been visited. I'm aware of you know, a couple of instances where people have shown up and just given little hints of you know, writing on people's driveways or their houses with chalk and things like that.
Hints like threats?
No, I mean, just like your typical graffiti that you would see downtown, only with, you know, chalk or something like that, just as a, hey, we were here, just so you know, type thing. So, I mean, those are experiences that people I work with have had.
Has that happened, or at least happened as much prior to these nightly protests?
No, not particularly. I mean, I think home visits by cop watch type YouTubers have been going on for the last few years, but I think, from my understanding, I think they've the more silent, subtle hints with the chalk and stuff. Those are becoming more frequent. I think.
Another sort of jumping around a bit, topics-wise, a topic that I wanted to ask you about was the presence of the federal officers here in Portland. A lot of people have, including the mayor, have said that they had the impression that the protests were dying down just before the... I'm sorry?
Okay.
We're not allowed to talk about the federal office.
Even just your take on...
Any litigation.
Okay. Anything tied to it? Can't talk about the federal officers at all.
No.
I mean, the mayor is the police commissioner. He's talked about it.
Maybe you talk to the mayor. We're not allowed to say that.
Okay. Is that from the chief?
That's the direction from chief, city attorneys.
From the
City
city
attorneys
attorneys?
and city council.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I won't ask you about that.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think, I mean, like I said, we are rolling, obviously. So, like, this, yeah, we just want to make it very clear. Like, we would like to ask a few questions just about the reaction of the Bureau coming in, and you're saying complete blanket moratorium on that topic in its entirety.
For us,
I'm sorry, with the masking, sorry.
yes. For us, yes.
For us, okay. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just sending my boss a message.
No,
real quick.
please. Okay. Different topic.
Okay.
Multnomah County's new DA has said today that he will not be prosecuting cases tied to a list of some of the most common charges that we've seen tied to arrests from the protests, including in some cases rioting. Can you give me your reaction to that?
I was, how do I put this? I was going to say I was surprised, but I think it's dangerous in that if you, I mean, I think it's going to have the effect of emboldening people to do more during these events. They are going to know that when we declare a riot, it means nothing. They're going to know that they can get away with a certain amount of vandalism, potentially assaults on officers, resisting arrest without facing any consequences other than, they can still be arrested, and actually the direction from the chief is that we will still make those arrests. And but the fact of the matter is if the DA's office isn't going to be a partner in this whole system that where we're working to kind of stabilize and return to some form of normalcy, it's going to be extremely difficult, and I really think that it could have the potential of ramping things up.
Does it make you feel like the DA doesn't trust Portland police to make these arrests correctly?
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know him. I don't really know much about him other than I've read his policy from today. I don't know if it's a trust issue. I think it's his policy. It's a policy issue. If he believes that that's the best way to address these things, then I mean, I'm a police sergeant. I mean, who am I to say that he's wrong? I just can simply say that I believe, based on my experience, that I think it's dangerous, and I don't necessarily think that the people of Portland or the people in Multnomah County are going to. I mean, I was going to say benefit by it, but I mean, I think it could be detrimental to people, particularly those who, live, work, and own businesses in, these areas that are affected.
Another element of redundancy, if you could speak to, I mean, just some of the stories that you told in your press conference that were really hard to hear, and specifically talking about the night you all were in the Justice Center, and then also I think you spoke about a female colleague of yours who endured. I'm sure you're just plucking some of the story that you
Yeah.
could tell, but I think, and maybe you don't want to tell different ones now, but I think if you could sort of speak to some of the instances that I think maybe you feel like the public hasn't heard enough of, that only you guys could know, and those who were there, the protesters, could know, or the people who were in the crowd could know.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think the only thing that I would really emphasize is you know, the night at the Justice Center, where, you know, essentially it was 3 sworn officers that were, you know, for a period of time. I can't even say we were defending the building, because we weren't. I mean, given the direction from the direction we were given from command to, you know, kind of stay out of sight and try to de-escalate everything, you know, working within the parameters of what we had was pretty difficult with the resources that we had. And again, in my observation, and you know, it was one of those nights where everybody that was out there was participating in this violence, essentially. You know, it was really a difficult circumstance to work through. But the one thing that I think that I missed, the one opportunity that I may have missed out on, was the instance in front of the PPA office with you know, my female colleagues that were, you know, taking that abuse from the crowd. And I guess I didn't really emphasize that it wasn't just one person in the crowd that was saying those things. It was a large group of people in the crowd that were saying those things, and they were saying it over megaphones, you know, 6 inches from the officers' faces. It was very blatant, very calculated, and you know, I think a lot of what these groups are trying to do, you know, I mean, it's a tactic. It's like a, you know, I don't know if they think they're engaging in psychological warfare or what, but you know, I mean, they'll sit there and they'll say these horrible things to you, and they'll tell you that everybody hates you and that you're a racist, and you know, all of this stuff. And you know, one thing that in the moment, one thing that kind of helps me balance that is you know, okay, well, they're standing here and they're calling me a racist or saying whatever, but you know, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with people of color that are on my side of the line. We're far more diverse group than what I see out there, and I trust the people to my side with my life, and that includes people of every color. And we have a bond and a brotherhood, sisterhood that you know, that is really, it's unbreakable. And you know, for somebody to sit there and accuse me of being a racist when I'm standing here with, you know, like I said, with a diverse group, we're all working towards the same goals, and we're all friends when we leave. And that's coming from, you know, largely white people who think that they have to speak for, you know, the black and brown people in the crowd. It's you know, it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's one of the ways that I'm able to kind of, you know, compartmentalize it. And it's like, well, they don't really know what they're talking about. So.
You could have a magic wand to sort of control the response to what's happening in Portland right now. Like, you had the power of the mayor, you had the power / police commissioner, of the chief, and they gave it to you and they said, all right, you've been out there enough, you have the expertise, what should we do?
Wow. You know, that's something that I don't think any of us have the answer to, and I think if we did, we wouldn't be here, honestly. I don't know. You know, again, I'm a lowly patrol sergeant who, you know, on my day job is to, you know, be out here with the men and women of the Portland Police Bureau who are responding to calls for service, and just basically supporting them in their job. I mean, that's what my job is. You know, the ins and outs of policy and politics and you know, money and how all of these things run are well beyond me. And I don't know, I wouldn't know what resources I'd have available to me. I mean, I really don't have an answer. But the one thing that I think that I can control and that I can do is stuff like this. And you know, and that's why I'm here, really. Again, this is not my thing, but I think if people can understand that, I mean, we're out here, we're doing the best that we can with what we have. I have never seen an officer, you know, it just going after somebody, you know, based on their race is not something that I've ever seen. And you know, Sergeant Foxworth talked about it in the press conference. You know, he's been with the police bureau for just shy of what I've been, you know, 18 years, and he said he's never experienced racism from within the Portland Police Bureau. And that's the experience that I have. I mean, if people out there think that we're going after minority people just for the simple fact that of the color of their skin, they're completely wrong. And if they would take the time, rather than yell and scream at us, to ask in an appropriate time, you know, not when we're in the middle of whatever we're doing, but if they took the time to ask us what we're doing, what our motivations are, I think they'd find that you know, we act reasonably, and we do, I mean, everything that we do is in good faith. And you know, I think starting with that message is hopefully there would be an understanding that, you know, we should be trusted. I mean, you know, we're out here doing work for the citizens. And you know, the other thing is I fully 100% believe that the vast majority of people out there do support us. But it's just getting that message to, you know, the few people that are very resistant to it. That's the difficult piece.
Anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I would, or that you want to say?
Gosh,
I feel like we haven't touched on.
I'll probably think of everything right as I'm driving out of the driveway. So
Okay.
I don't know.
If you do, you can call and we can
Sure.
record it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, is there anything, maybe a better question is, anything else that you've seen reported by us or by someone else that you'd like to take the time to refute or
Well,
counter?
Okay, so
We don't need that anymore.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing that I will say is you know, there's this narrative, like I mean, I kind of just touched on it. There's this narrative out there that, you know, the police are racist, and these are the reasons that all of these things are happening. I mean, you take for example George Floyd. That there's not one Portland police officer that I've spoken to that believes that was the right thing for that officer to do. You know, I mean, there's not one person out there that I work with that looks at that and says that's okay. And I've told people out here in the crowd who, of course, you know, some argue back, and some, you know, I've gotten, I guess, various responses, but I believe that if that exact same circumstance happened in the city of Portland, it would have a totally different result. We train differently. We, you know, we are accountable. We look out for each other, and if one of us saw somebody kneeling on somebody in that manner, we would absolutely, I mean, the first thing I said when I was watching that is get off him, get him into the car, you know, don't, I mean, that's not the position to put people in. And I think people in Portland should realize that they've got a very progressive police department. They have some of the best trained men and women in this industry across the country, and that's the absolute truth. And I think there are a lot of agencies across the country that look to Portland as kind of the model for certain, you know, for training, for, you know, crowd management. I mean, there are agencies that look to us for that. We're on the, you know, we're kind of on the forefront of a lot of things, and you know, people in Portland have it really, really good. They have really good people that work here, and they have really good people, regardless of, you know, whether they you know, live in the city. I know there's a lot of arguments about living or you know, living outside of the city. Every police officer is still a part of the community. I mean, we work the districts. We try to get to know the people. We would love to do more of that. We're stretched thin. We have to go call to call, and you know, it's just, people have it really, really good here. We are a good agency.
A lot of people in the crowd would say no matter how good the people are here, we're talking about, they believe, a system that is set up to, a punitive system that is set up to unfairly target demographics of people of color who, due to a complicated variety of facets in our society, have been marginalized. And that therefore, almost they would look at what you're saying as proof that you're right, the system needs to be abolished, because even the best police officers in the most progressive city can't fix that problem. That problem still exists. So what would you say to that? They would say, they would almost agree with what you said and then take it a step further in that direction.
Well, I mean, look, I'll say, these are they're my views. They don't necessarily, reflect. They certainly don't reflect the police bureau. But I can't say that I've experienced anything other than what I've experienced. I can't look at something from the perspective of anybody but me. I guess I know what my motivations are, and my motivations have, everything that we do is based. We're reactive. We react to what people do, and we react to behaviors and calls and crime and all that stuff, and so I think, again, part of the problem isn't down here with us, it's up here. If we're calling this whole chain a system, well, then if parts of the system above us need to be changed, we've already talked about that, take some of that and put it up here for mental health. But I don't believe that the statistics necessarily reflect what the belief is, that, people are oppressed. I mean, we have immense opportunity in this country, and I believe everybody has it. I mean, there are people that step out of poverty, and I think it's all in the motivation that particular individual has. I mean, I believe in economic privilege, absolutely, but I don't know that there's nothing holding people back if they're motivated.
But for generations there has been, with housing policy and education, and black families were legally and systematically kept out of predominantly white neighborhoods, and that my family was able to gather generations of wealth because I'm white, that black families weren't. So we are talking about, there is absolute economic privilege that was created by design. Maybe not everybody in the country is aware of it. Many more are becoming aware of it.
Do those policies still exist, though? I don't know.
The repercussions of them still very much exist.
Okay. But how do we fix that? If the policies don't exist anymore, if the policies don't exist anymore, then what is holding people back from taking it upon themselves to lift themselves out of that? It's difficult, and I don't know the answer, and I'm certainly not trying to discount again anybody's position on it. I just, I work from, I know what my motivations are when I come out here, and I want to be the best police officer that I can be for the people that are out here. And I think that there needs to be a bigger discussion from both sides as to, what are you experiencing, how can I help, and vice versa.
Last question for you. You mentioned that you are switching positions and going to be going into some facet of training. And you also mentioned, and this has been widely known, that the Bureau is stretched thin as is.
Yeah.
What do you think recruiting is going to look like?
That's tough. I don't know. I don't know what the budget holds. I don't know what it looks like in terms of, I know we've got several people that are retiring. I don't know if those positions are going to be filled. My focus, in my understanding, in going to that new position in training, is that I'll be overseeing the in-service training for the existing officers. And so that will, I guess, kind of have a little bit of job security with it, because there's still people here that need to, continue to train and maintain their certification.
You feel like if you had to train new officers, you'd have less job security?
I don't know. I guess potentially, because the number of academies I'm sure will kind of dwindle a little bit. But there's always going to be a need for training. There's always going to be a need for top-notch trainers, and that's kind of something that Sergeant Foxworth hit on in the last in his interview last week. He spent a long time over in the training division, and you know, you need to have people that are really the best, essentially the best of the best. You know, smart, experienced, and willing to be innovators, and to go out there and really find out what the best way to do something is, and be able to translate that into a program that officers can pick up on and easily use in a moment's notice on the street.
Okay. Anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to put out there? Are you going to be out at the protest tonight?
I don't know
The
the answer
gathering
to that
tonight?
yet.
You don't know the...
I don't know.
When do you find out?
Well, I don't know if that phone call was about that or not.
Do you guys find out day to day if you're going to be out there?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it just kind of depends on how the flow of events go.
Yeah.
We have an idea, just based on intelligence and stuff, kind of what's going on, but we never know how big the crowds are going to be, and we're just kind of always on standby until we're not on standby anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else that you would like us to speak to or ask about, or? Okay. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.